Welcome to 5 News. Imagine getting lost in the vast wilderness, miles away from civilization, with just your backpack and your wits to guide you. Sounds intense, right? Well, that's exactly what happened to a group of adventurers during a thrilling expedition in the wilderness. Picture this, it all began as a fun-filled trip, the sun shining brightly, and excitement was in the air. The group was ready to hike through the stunning forest trails, surrounded by towering trees, chirping birds, and picturesque sights. But as the day progressed, a slight miscalculation turned their adventure into a nail-biting scenario. So, what went wrong? They hit a fork in the trail. A quick debate ensued about which path to take. Should they follow the winding route that looked a bit more inviting or take the steep and rugged path that seemed less traveled? With a mixture of enthusiasm and a dash of overconfidence, they opted for the scenic route, thinking it would lead them to the breathtaking overlook they hoped to find. But that choice quickly turned into a mishap. Hours passed, and they realized they were going in circles without any sign of their intended landmark. Anxiety began to creep in. Do you think anyone in the group had a map or a compass? Not a chance. Panic started to kick in as they began to feel the weight of uncertainty. As the sun slowly set behind the trees, casting eerie shadows on their faces, what would they do next? They came together, sharing their snacks and creating a plan. They decided to follow the sound of flowing water, hoping it might lead them to safety. After a tense walk, they finally found a stream. Their spirits lifted, but the journey was far from over. Can you imagine the tension as they navigated their way back? Ultimately, they stumbled upon a trail that led them back to civilization, exhausted but filled with stories of survival and teamwork. So, what lesson did they learn? Always be prepared. Whether hiking or exploring anywhere. Having a plan, a map, and a sprinkle of caution can make all the difference in your adventure. Would you take the scenic route, or stick to the path you know? Mineral deal that Ukraine is negotiating with the United States is stirring up quite a bit of conversation, isn't it? So, what's the latest? Well, President Zelensky is hoping to make the most of this opportunity, but there's a catch. A senior U.S. official has pointed out that this minerals deal doesn't guarantee any future security for Ukraine. Can you believe that? Now, let's rewind a bit. Remember when U.S. President Donald Trump was in talks with Zelensky about this minerals deal? It was all about those precious rare earth minerals that are so valuable. Trump wanted to ensure that what the U.S. was putting on the table would come with some guarantees. He even mentioned a staggering $500 billion offer, but Zelensky turned it down not once, but twice. In response, Trump made it clear that military support for Ukraine would be cut if this deal didn't go through. He argued that the U.S. had already provided more support than Europe, and that Europe should step up more, especially since Ukraine is right on their doorstep. But wait, there's more. Zelensky later hinted that the mineral agreement could be revisited. Meanwhile, the U.S. has committed to continuing its military and intelligence support for Ukraine, effective immediately. Sounds promising, right? However, this has raised eyebrows in Europe. EU member states are not too keen on Ukraine's deal with the U.S. They're worried that Trump might end up calling the shots on this minerals deal, and they believe any agreement should align with European standards. Germany, in particular, has been vocal about this. The Berlin government has sent a strong message to Washington, insisting that the rules governing the minerals deal must be fair and transparent. So, what do you think? Will this minerals deal benefit Ukraine, or could it lead to more complications? Let's keep an eye on how this unfolds. Germany's strong response to the minerals agreement is certainly raising eyebrows worldwide. So, how will the United States react to Germany's concerns? And what about the wider European Union? Could there be backing for Germany's stance from other EU members? These are the crucial questions we're diving into today. Let's revisit the key details. Germany's Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock, made it clear that any minerals deal between the US and Ukraine must align with European law. This isn't just a casual remark, it reflects a pre-existing understanding within the EU that agreements with Ukraine should adhere to their legal framework. Isn't it fascinating how interconnected these diplomatic relationships are? Both Germany and Ukraine have aligned in their stance regarding this minerals deal. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has even stated that Ukraine will not endorse an agreement that could compromise its path toward joining the European Union. Can you imagine the stakes? Zelensky emphasized that Ukraine's constitution explicitly reinforces its commitment to EU integration. Talk about high-level diplomacy. Now, here's the kicker. Zelensky confirmed that Kyiv received a fresh draft of the proposed minerals deal from Washington just recently. This draft isn't just a rehash, it includes new terms that had not been discussed before. Some of these points were previously rejected by both parties. So, what do you think? Will these new provisions satisfy Ukraine while keeping in line with EU regulations? Zelensky's firm stance on protecting Ukraine's EU ambitions adds another layer of complexity to the negotiations. With such a pivotal issue hanging in the balance, it seems increasingly unlikely that a deal could be struck without careful consideration of those EU membership aspirations. Only time will tell how this drama unfolds, but one thing's for sure, the dialogue between the US, Germany, and Ukraine is critical for the future of all involved. Stay tuned, as we continue to follow this story closely. So, what's happening with the new US proposal and its impact on the agreement regarding Ukraine's mineral resources? Paula Pino, a representative from the European Commission, shared that they're looking into the text, which might give American companies a boost if both sides can reach a solid agreement. Interesting, right? Pino also mentioned that this agreement must be examined through the lens of Ukraine's relationship with the European Union, especially considering those crucial accession negotiations. So, how does this tie into the larger picture of Ukraine and the EU? Now, let's dive into the details of the US-Ukraine minerals agreement. As of now, specifics about the new US deal remain a bit murky. Washington hasn't laid all the cards on the table just yet. But there are indications that this agreement might build upon previous terms. So, why does that matter? Because understanding what those earlier agreements entailed is crucial for grasping the current situation. Remember the original minerals deal from the Trump administration? It called for Ukraine to use its mineral wealth to pay back $500 billion for military assistance received earlier. But here's the catch, it didn't actually assign rights to that mineral revenue to the US, nor did it offer a security guarantee for Ukraine. Instead, it created a joint investment fund owned by both nations. Under this framework, Ukraine would funnel half of the revenues from future monetization of its natural resource assets into this fund. This included valuable resources like minerals, oil, and gas, but it specifically left out income-generating resources, such as operations by Naftogaz and Ukrnafta, Ukraine's major oil and gas players. So, what does this mean for Ukraine? Essentially, the fund's success hinges on making new investments in its resources. How will this unfold in the coming months? Only time will tell. The fund was designed to be reinvested back into Ukraine, aimed at developing vital assets like mineral deposits, oil, gas infrastructure, and ports. But here's the catch, these projects still need to be fleshed out in detail in the final funding agreement. Why is this important? Because the goal of these investments from the fund is to spark greater interest from the private sector in Ukrainian resources. This push is all about attracting the capital that Ukraine will need for reconstruction and resource development. But let's not forget, the private sector's reaction is absolutely key for this fund to thrive. How much value do you think the United States will eventually gain depends significantly on this response. On a different note, while this agreement lays groundwork for these investments, it doesn't do much to bolster Ukraine's security or reaffirm the financial and military backing from the US in the ongoing conflict. The thought process here, however, is that with a joint US-Ukraine investment in the country's resources, America will have a vested interest in Ukraine's security and stability. This could motivate a stronger commitment to support and defend Ukraine's safety. Now, Washington is particularly enthusiastic about a minerals deal built on this foundation. Why? Because they see these minerals as essential not just for Ukraine's development but also for ensuring military and financial aid. But what kind of minerals are we really talking about? According to the World Economic Forum, Ukraine is identified as a major potential provider of rare earth metals. It's estimated that the country holds around 5% of the global reserves of these metals, which include 30 different substances classified as crucial by the European Union. Most of Ukraine's mineral riches are situated in the Ukrainian Shield, a region that encompasses areas like Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, and Dnipro, much of which is currently under Russian control. The Ministry of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources claims that Ukraine boasts Europe's largest reserves of graphite, lithium, titanium, and uranium. These materials are essential for making batteries, defense equipment, and nuclear fuel. While China is the top dog when it comes to titanium production, did you know that Ukraine ranks right up there among the leading producers? Who would have thought? Did you know that the titanium market is quite the player in global supply chains? In the United States, even with its relatively modest output, titanium mines are found in places like Nevada, Utah, and Virginia. This metal is a heavyweight when it comes to applications, especially in aerospace. Think about it, titanium is used in critical components like bulkheads and engine parts of the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, designed to resist the extreme temperatures generated during supersonic flight. Back in the 1960s, when the US was secretly sourcing titanium from the Soviet Union to build the SR-71 spy plane, who would have thought? Fast forward to 2023, and before the conflict in Ukraine, the country was a key player in titanium supply to the military sector. They had their largest titanium producer sold to a private entity operating two significant mines in Dnipropetrovsk and Zhytomyr. And let's talk about lithium, a crucial metal. It's at the heart of the lithium-ion batteries, found in everything from our sleek smartphones to high-powered electric vehicles. The top producers of lithium are Chile, Australia, and China, with batteries alone accounting for a whopping 80% of the overall demand. But here's where it gets interesting. Ukraine is sitting on one of Europe's largest lithium reserves, estimated at 500,000 tons, which is about 3% of the global stash. The catch? None of it is being mined right now. To get that ball rolling would take hundreds of millions of dollars in investment, and with about 25% of Ukraine's lithium deposits caught up in Russian-occupied territories, it's a challenge. The extraction of lithium from pegmatite, which is a more complex and costlier material compared to the spodumene used by other lithium producers, requires advanced technology and substantial capital. Meanwhile, when you look at graphite production, it's overwhelmingly dominated by China, which controls more than 85% of the global supply. Isn't it fascinating how interconnected and complicated these supply chains are? Mining partnerships can blossom. The road to progress might be more winding than we'd hope. Have you ever thought about how long it takes to establish a successful mine? Typically, after identifying mineral reserves, it can take anywhere from 8 to 10 years just to get everything up and running. That's quite a while, isn't it? Plus, think about the staggering costs involved. Building a mine and a separation plant can set you back between $500 million and $1 billion. It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? Now, keep in mind that Ukraine's mineral reserves are like a treasure chest waiting to be unlocked. With proper geological mapping and the right investments, these treasures could be tapped into more effectively. But let's be honest, for Ukraine to make the most of these resources, attracting private investment is key. If Ukraine can showcase its potential, it might just entice investors to dive in. But here's an interesting twist: unlike China or Russia, the US government can't simply direct companies to venture into Ukrainian mining. It raises a question: how will this impact progress? It's all about investment and partnership, not government mandates. As we look to the future, how essential do you think these minerals will be as electric vehicles gain traction worldwide? Cobalt and lithium are at the heart of this growth, making them not just vital for electric vehicles, but also for renewable energy solutions. The potential benefits of mining partnerships between the US and Ukraine are substantial. But will they come to fruition? And let's not forget about mine safety. What role do you think safety should play in these mining operations? It's a concern that can't be brushed aside in the rush to harness these minerals. Ultimately, progress lies in diligent planning. Strategic investments, and a shared commitment to safety and sustainability. Are we ready to embrace this challenge together? Investing in Ukraine has its fair share of hurdles, wouldn't you say? Even while intergovernmental agreements might look good on paper, they often don't entice the private sector to invest as much as one might hope. It's clear that a simple bilateral deal won't solve the complex problems that lie ahead, especially when we consider the lack of reliable reserves data. Oh, and don't forget the crucial infrastructure that's been lost along with persistent security threats in the area. Have you ever thought about the scale of these challenges? For instance, there isn't much solid data regarding the rare earth elements and strategic materials in Ukraine, just the insights from the former director of the Geological Survey of Ukraine, who pointed out that the current reserve assessments are outdated, sometimes going back 30 to 60 years. Those old maps? They were created during Soviet times, using long-forgotten exploration techniques. Key factors that determine if mining operations are worth the investment, like depth, grade, byproducts, and location, remain unverified. Without that crucial information, who in their right mind would gamble hundreds of millions of dollars on what might turn out to be a barren deposit? And let's talk about the impact of war. It's no secret that war devastates infrastructure. Mining is one of the most energy-intensive industries, contributing to about 38% of global industrial energy usage and around 15% of total electricity consumption. Can you believe that between 2022 and 2023, nearly half of Ukraine's electricity generating capacity was either occupied, damaged, or outright destroyed due to Russian attacks? That's staggering. On top of that, a significant number of key grid substations faced damage from missile strikes and drones. As a result, Ukraine is left with only one-third of its electricity capacity from before the conflict began. Before any mineral exploration or production can even think about starting, major energy infrastructure will need to be rebuilt. And let's not overlook the reluctance of mining companies to commit to long-term investments with the looming specter of security risks. Does that make you wonder what the future holds for mining in Ukraine? As we've seen, the absence of solid security assurances in the bilateral agreement adds layers of complexity to the situation. So, what's going on with Ukraine's leadership? Is President Volodymyr Zelensky playing a strategic game here? After weeks of discussions regarding a mineral contract, there's been a shift toward looking at options within the European Union instead of the United States. Imagine the impact. The French government is poised to offer Ukraine a substantial increase in military assistance in return for these precious minerals. This idea was first floated last autumn when Zelensky brought up the raw materials during his visit to Paris. Sébastien Lecornu, the French Minister of Armed Forces, emphasized that Ukraine's president made various proposals not just to the US, but also directly to France. Why is this significant? Well, France's defense industry is on the lookout for a steady supply of essential raw materials to sustain its national weapons systems, not just for next year, but extending into the next 30 to 40 years. What's even more intriguing is that Le Cornu revealed that French President Emmanuel Macron has pushed for talks with Ukrainian representatives over the past few months. Could this be the right moment for France to strengthen its position? Particularly since the German government has insisted that any mineral agreements comply with EU standards, and Zelensky appears to be on board with that. But wait, what about Russia? Currently, reports indicate that around 40% of Ukraine's mineral resources are under Russian control in the eastern regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. Some estimates even suggest this figure might soar to 70%. How will this challenge impact France's plans moving forward? As the landscape shifts, it raises many questions about the future of these mineral agreements and the broader geopolitical implications. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. We also recommend checking out our other videos. You'll definitely love them.